Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, this is what I think in my opinion, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you through it. Maybe you can do your own research and see exactly why it is that this is happening. And not only this right here, but I just found out, I think it was a day or two ago, that this administration is now going to give an additional $45 billion in aid to the big EU, right? That country in Eastern Europe that's involved in a war with the big R. But this right here, ladies and gentlemen, is all being done by design. This is not for humanitarian aid. This has to do with one thing and one thing alone. Now, let me go ahead and just off the top of my head, tell you a few things that I see. Social Security. We all hear that Social Security is going to be bankrupt in like the year 2037 or something like that. Medicare is supposed to be bankrupt by like the year 2028. Right now, a lot of the population in the United States receives entitlements in the form of SNAP, food assistance, things like this. Every single year, our government's debt goes up, meaning that we have a deficit, meaning that we spend more as a nation than what we actually bring in from taxes and tariffs and things like this. Well, how can it go on? How can this go on? It can't. The point is that this administration, they don't have compassion for these people. They're using them as pawns. And it's all part of the plan, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to prove it to you because this has been in the works for the last 40, 50 years. Remember that people who are sociopaths, narcissistic, psychopaths, they're very patient. They can wait a while in order for their plan to play through. And their plan has been playing through all this time. This has to do with one thing and one thing alone. Let me show you what that is. I've talked about this before, and I'm going to revisit it again. It's called the Cloward and Piven strategy. And it's a very simple read. And all you have to do is go do your own research. That way, when I say that this has been in the works for 50, 60 years, that way you can see, yeah, you know what? It's true, it has been. Remember, I've often said that when it comes to government, nothing happens by happenstance, right? And yes, this has been planned. Richard Cloward and his wife, Frances Fox Piven, wrote about collapsing the United States economy and how they plan to do it in an article they co-authored in the 1960s called Mobilizing the Poor. Isn't that interesting, ladies and gentlemen? Mobilizing the poor. The people that are pouring through our southern line, are they of high status? More than likely not. So they say mobilizing the poor, but they don't say from where. How could it be done? Later, it was published in The Nation under the title, The Weight of the Poor, A Strategy to End Poverty. This strategy came to bear their nicknames as the Cloward and Piven strategy. And pretty much what that strategy is, and I'm going to read it to you what they say, but pretty much from a layman's perspective, is that when you take and overload a system, when you overload it and keep overloading it, and you can't just take that load anymore, it will stop. It's like, for example, if you're running an engine, right, and you keep overloading that engine and keep overloading it until you've put so much stress on that system that it can no longer turn, it's going to seize up and it's going to stop working. So look at our nation, look at the United States of America as like an engine that runs smoothly when all the parts are running. But when you start putting stress on it and more stress, and you're running at 100% of its capacity, and then you let it run to 105%, 110%, it may be able to do that for a little bit, but it won't be able to do that forever. And eventually it will seize. And this has been the plan all along. Remember that one world thing that they've been working on for a while, where they want to make all of the people, except for a very minor amount, a very small majority of the people, poor. This is how they do it. They collapse nations from within by overloading all of the infrastructure that it has been created in order to support the people that pay the taxes in that nation. So now this nation has decided to provide charity to all these other nations. I believe I did a short segment on a video about how this administration promised South Africa, I believe, or most of African nations there. I don't know, about 10 or 15 of them, I think it was, that they're going to provide them with reparations. They're going to provide them with reparations. And people here in the United States, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with this. No, I disagree with reparations. And people here in the United States that have been screaming about receiving reparations, they're like, wait a minute. You have the money to pay reparations, but now you're giving it to these countries in Africa and not giving it to anyone here? And the administration said, but wait, I have one better. Now we're going to send another $45 billion to the big U. The implementation of the Cloward and Piven strategy. In their estimation, it was to overwhelm the system and bring about the fall of capitalism by overloading the government bureaucracy with impossible demands and bring on an economic collapse. Like I said, this has been the plan all along, ladies and gentlemen, and you can't stop it, and neither can I. So you can prepare. Prepare, that way when we get to that other side, hopefully we can start over with a better nation that abides by the rule of law. Ask yourselves, is this not what has been going on? That our institutions that are here in the United States of America to protect us, to serve us, to take care of us, not meaning take care of us from the cradle to the grave, but to provide security at our borders, to provide security from invading nations, to do those kinds of things, they are now failing. And we now find ourselves paying more and more taxes, because even if you don't pay any taxes, even if you live below the poverty wage and you pay zero taxes, you still pay taxes, believe it or not. It's called regulations. It's called inflation. It's called mandates. All of those things cost money for companies to do, and you end up paying the price at the bottom line. Inflation, even though you may not be getting that money that was printed out of thin air for free, you are still paying for that money that was printed out of thin air. Why? Because now it is devaluing the dollars that you earn, the few dollars that you've earned living below the poverty line. So even if you don't pay any taxes, meaning that at tax season you have to pay in, or being that you get more back from the government than what you paid in throughout that year, you're still paying taxes. So our system is being overloaded on purpose. Why? Because they want a new system where you have no choices, where you cannot make decisions for yourself, where you cannot raise your children the way that you want to raise them, where you cannot drive to where you want to drive unless you get permission, where you can spend what you earn how they tell you to spend it, when they tell you to spend it, and they even get to tell you how long you get to keep that money before it zeroes out. This is what they want, ladies and gentlemen. What can we do? Prepare. And why am I saying that? What can we do? Prepare. Because, like I stated previously, there's not much that we can do to stop this train from hitting that wall. All right, ladies and gentlemen? And the only way that we're going to be able to resist when the government becomes tyrannical enough to try to impose physically into our lives is if we are prepared. It's the only way we'll be able to resist. That's the only way that we'll be able to stay strong and be strong when we finally make it to that other side. Because we will. Crises don't last forever. And one day, before I leave this physical world, I would like to see that we at least have a government in place that will protect the rule of law and abide by it. That way I know that my children and grandchild, and maybe grandchildren by then, will be able to live in a country that's free. And I would wish that upon every other country in the world as well. So don't be fooled by this. Don't let your emotional strings be pulled by this. Yes, bad things happen to good people every single day. But what's happening in this case, with this stuff that's going on in our southern states and our border states, this is all on purpose. And if you don't think it is, then you're lying to yourself. Just look it up. It doesn't take very long. And by the way, if you did not watch the video that I put out earlier today on how you can keep warm, I mean really warm, go check that out. Because from what I understand, most states in the lower 48 are going to be as cold, and some of them even colder by multitudes than what it is here in Alaska this time of year.